Tore soft steady. Tonight, we journey somewhere quiet. Not into castles or battles, but into the hush between footsteps. Into the space where hands meet net, and dawn meets salt and sand. There are no names carved in stone here. No crowns, no banners. Just a man, rising before light, listening to the tide speak in whispers. He does not know history will forget him. He only knows the feel of wet rope, and the sound of oars cutting through cold water. This is the story of quiet resilience, of a morning that began with breath and brine. So take a deep breath. Let the world outside dim. Let your thoughts drift like driftwood on the tide. We're going back, not to the halls of kings, but to the edge of a medieval sea, where day begins, barefoot and wordless. As the sun begins its slow descent beyond the thatched rooftops and crooked chimneys of an English village, the colors of the world start to shift. Shadows stretch longer, the air takes on a softness, and a hush begins to settle over the land. Evening was once a gradual thing. Not a flick of a switch or the sudden brightness of LEDs, but a slow fading. The light didn't vanish so much as it gently left. In the countryside, a milkmaid lingers at the edge of a pasture, her fingers pink from the chill of the tin pail. She glances at the sky and sees the first pale stars winking above the hedgerow. In a nearby cottage, her mother is already striking flint to steel, coaxing sparks into a wisp of straw to light the evening's first candle. Candles were not cheap and they were not lit carelessly. Most households reserved their use for moments of need, darning a stocking, reading the family Bible, or guiding a child safely to the privy out back. As twilight deepened, families began a quiet ritual of winding down the day. A child was sent to fetch kindling. Another might fill a ceramic jug with fresh water before the well was too dark to see. Doors were latched not with fear but with habit. In towns, shutters were drawn across narrow windows, and taverns began to buzz softly with pipe smoke and low voices. Inside a modest home, perhaps lit only by the orange flicker of a hearth and a single beeswax taper, a woman set her sewing aside and rubbed her eyes. Her fingers ached from the day's labor. A stew simmered gently on the trivet, casting up steam and the scent of onions and thyme. There was a softness to evenings back then, a gentleness born of necessity. Without the brightness of artificial light, people had to move slower. There was a respect for the night, not as something to fear but something to yield to. A servant might polish the last of the brass candlesticks before extinguishing her lantern. A merchant, writing by the last of the daylight in his ledger, squints as the ink fades from view. And on the edge of the village, the old clockmaker climbs a wooden ladder to wind the town's mechanical bell before the light is truly gone. In Paris, a very different kind of twilight unfolds. The lamplighters, their long poles tipped with burning flame, make their rounds in the winding alleys of the Marais. Each lantern they ignite brings a soft golden glow to the cobbled streets. They nod to one another, their shadows dancing on the walls. Above them, in a narrow apartment, a seamstress lays her thread aside and stretches her back. She opens a shutter to let in the last light. There is a hush, carriages rattling in the distance, a dog barking far away. The world was quieter then. Not silent, but softer. Back in the English village, supper is finished. Bowls scraped clean, the breadbasket empty. The children are yawning. One curls up beside the hearth, thumb in mouth, the other waits patiently as her father trims the candle's wick. The flame brightens slightly, just enough to continue reading aloud from a much-handled book. Outside, night has fully fallen. The sky is ink and velvet. A dog is curled on the threshold. Somewhere an owl calls. And inside that small cottage, one by one, the candles are snuffed. A whisper of smoke curls up into the rafters, and sleep descends gently over the household. Evening, once darkness had settled, was not an end but a shift. The world outside turned to ink and silence, but inside the home, life continued, gently, carefully, in a smaller circle of warmth. For most in the 18th century, that warmth came from a hearth. The hearth was not just a place to cook. It was the center of the home, spiritual, practical, and emotional. Flames danced within stone or brick, casting soft orange hues on low ceilings and lime-washed walls. Shadows shifted across beams and hung garments like slow waves. It was near the hearth that people gathered, huddled, unwound. A father, his shirt sleeves rolled above the wrist, might pull a low stool closer to the coals, pipe in hand. The rhythmic tamping of tobacco, the occasional spark, and the sigh of exhale became part of the night's gentle soundtrack. Near him, his wife crouches to stir the ashes. She uses a long iron poker to shift the embers, not for warmth now but to bank them, preserve the heart of the fire overnight so it can be coaxed alive again at dawn. There is an art to this, laying the charred logs just right, setting small pieces of fuel nearby, half-covered, ready to catch. Above the hearth, a mantle. Not like modern ones adorned with photo frames or cluttered knickknacks, but rather simple, perhaps a crock of salt, a candlestick, a ribbon tied around a child's doll, or a worn Bible with soft, thumbed pages. The children in this home are quieter now, their daytime energy faded into the lull of routine. One mends a tear in a doll's dress, squinting in the candlelight. Another stacks kindling neatly for tomorrow morning. Their movements are slow, deliberate. There is no rush. Time in the evening does not gallop forward. It meanders gently, like the smoke that curls upward from the hearth. Some families, particularly in towns or wealthier homes, may have a second room lit by oil lamps, drawing rooms, parlors, or studies where books waited and conversation unfolded slowly. But for the majority, especially rural families and working folk, the hearth room was all they needed. It contained everything of value: food, heat, light, each other. A grandmother wraps a shawl over her shoulders and slowly lowers herself into a creaking chair. Her knitting lies unfinished in her lap, though her fingers move out of habit. She listens more than she speaks now, content to simply be in the presence of others. The conversation is soft. Bits of the day are retold in half-sentences, with long pauses between. A child laughs quietly at something remembered, a goat's stubbornness, a neighbor's misplaced hat. The adults smile but don't laugh loudly. The laughter of night is muffled, restrained, respectful of the stillness. Elsewhere, in the stone farmhouse of a tenant family, a similar evening unfolds. A man sits sharpening a blade with slow, circular motions on a whetstone. Not because the task is urgent but because it calms him. His mind drifts as the metal glides against stone. Nearby, his wife finishes braiding lengths of garlic to hang from the rafters. They will dry slowly there, among bundles of thyme and lavender. There's a rhythm to these evenings. Not a schedule imposed by clocks, but a pattern repeated by generations. Tasks quiet the hands. Light fades. Voices soften. In some homes, an elder might tell a story, an old tale of saints or forest spirits or a neighbor long since passed. These weren't bedtime stories in the modern sense, but oral memories. Pieces of the past handed down not because they were thrilling, but because they were part of life. Recounted slowly, almost drowsily, with pauses long enough for the fire to crackle between words. In larger towns and among wealthier households, candles might burn later, and evenings might stretch longer into the night. Parlors filled with guests, music played quietly on harpsichords, hands holding teacups or sherry. But even here there was a gentle civility to the night. Men removed their shoes and donned house slippers. Ladies unwound their stays slightly, sighing in relief. The night was not for performances, it was for retreat. Even the servants, once the day's work was done, had their routines. A maid might brush her hair quietly by a tiny rushlight in her attic corner. A stable boy might polish his boots by lantern, careful not to wake the cook sleeping nearby. Their days were longer, their rest shorter. But even for them, there was a dignity in the quiet rituals of night. And outside, beyond the door and shutter, the world grew still. No hum of traffic. No glow of neon signs. Just night. The only sounds were natural: an owl's cry, the rustling of wind through bare trees, the trickle of a creek slipping past reeds and stones. Maybe a horse's distant whinny. Maybe the creak of a weather vane turning in the dark. Within the homes, flame remained the last guardian of the evening. Candles burned low. Oil lamps flickered, drawing long shadows on plaster walls. People moved a little slower now. A little more deliberately. No one squinted at clocks or raced against alarms. When the body felt tired, sleep came. And so the house shifted toward rest. In a corner, a woman kneels beside a cradle, gently rocking it with one foot. Her child stirs, fusses, then drifts back into dreams. She hums, not a lullaby with a name but something instinctive. Half melody, half breath. Her own mother may have sung the same wordless tune. Near the hearth, a young man leans back in his chair, his book open in his lap but unread. His eyes half closed, candlelight reflected on the bridge of his nose. He is not quite asleep, but not far from it. The fire burns lower. Embers glow deep red. The grandmother, who never finished her knitting, has begun to doze in her chair. Her head tips forward slowly. No one wakes her. The clock in the corner chimes once. A low, soft sound. Not sharp. Not demanding. Just a reminder, the hour is passing. But no one rushes to bed. Sleep does not need chasing. It arrives gently, like dusk. Like smoke curling upward. Like a flame flickering low. One by one the family drifts. and the glow of the hearth, once vibrant, becomes a memory in the dark. Before the night could be softened by flame, before a prayer could be read or a stocking mended after sunset, someone had to craft the candle. And so, as we shift into the quieter reaches of this evening world, we take a step backward, into the quiet, fragrant workshop of the candle maker. The air is thick with a waxy warmth, tinged faintly with the scent of tallow or, more pleasantly, of beeswax and bayberry. Light filters in from small windows, dust motes dancing lazily in the glow. Shelves line the walls, holding rows of candles in various stages of readiness. Short stubs, long tapers, bundled rushlights tied with twine. The work here is steady, rhythmic. Repetition, not speed, defines the craft. In many parts of 18th century Europe, particularly in rural towns and small cities, candle making was done at home or by small local tradespeople. In larger cities like London or Paris, a candle maker might have a modest shop, his name painted in hand-lettered script on a swinging wooden sign above the door. Chandler, derived from the Old French chandelier. To understand a candle's quiet power, we must first understand its making. The simplest and cheapest candles were made of tallow, a rendered fat typically from sheep or cows. The fat was melted down in large iron pots, purified through boiling and straining, and left to cool slightly until it thickened. Into this warm pool of grease, the candle maker would dip wicks, one after another, again and again. Each layer added a little more heft. And slowly a candle took shape. The wick itself was no simple thread. Made of tightly twisted cotton, it had to be firm enough to stand upright in the hot wax, yet soft enough to burn evenly. A poorly made wick would gutter or smoke. A skilled chandler knew how to braid his wicks just so they curled into the flame and self-trimmed as they burned. But tallow, despite its abundance, came with downsides. It smoked. It dripped. It smelled, especially when extinguished, leaving behind the scent of scorched meat and ash. And so, for those who could afford it, beeswax was preferred. Beeswax candles burned brighter and cleaner. Their scent, faintly sweet, carried the memory of honeycombs and hives, of meadows in bloom. Their light was golden rather than gray, and their flame held steadier in a breeze. But beeswax was not common. It required beekeeping, patience, and a careful hand. For monasteries and churches, where candles burned often and long, beeswax was sacred, used in altars and chapels, a symbol of purity. In some coastal regions, bayberry was harvested to make candles. Its waxy green berries boiled in great cauldrons, the resulting wax skimmed from the surface. These candles held a delicate, herbal fragrance. But they too were rare. A full pound of wax might require 15 pounds of berries. As with many things before industrial production, what was pure and beautiful was also expensive and slow. In ordinary homes, a mix of lighting was used. A few precious beeswax tapers kept for Sundays or guests, tallow for the hearth and rushlights, strips of dried plant stalks dipped in grease, used for small humble tasks. A rushlight might last 20 minutes. Its flame was dim and quick burning and it had to be watched closely. But it cost almost nothing and could be made at home in batches. Women would collect rushes from the marshes in late summer, peel them carefully, soak them, then hang them in the rafters to dry. In the cool of evening, a family might dip them together, one by one, into leftover tallow. Candles were not used casually. Each one represented labor, animal fat rendered, wax melted, wicks twisted, dipped, trimmed, cooled, stored. Every inch that burned away was an inch that could not be reclaimed. So families learned to be sparing. A candle might be lit for reading scripture, then snuffed. Another might burn in the kitchen during supper, then carried upstairs for bedtime. In wealthier homes, a brass candle holder might accompany a lady from parlor to bedchamber. In humbler cottages, a simple iron spike held a rushlight at an angle, illuminating just enough to see by. And always the flames danced. Tiny flickers in the vast dark. Guiding hands to needlework, eyes to pages, feet to their beds. The candlemaker's world was not glamorous. It was quiet, sticky, hot, and deeply necessary. His hands smelled of wax and soot. His apron was stained. But his work brought light, literal and symbolic, into the lives of others. Even the shapes of candles carried quiet meaning. Tapers for tables. Short, squat votives for prayer. Thick pillar candles for altars and winter vigils. Birthday candles did not yet exist in this era, but saints' days and name days often included candle offerings at local chapels. A mother might carry a single beeswax candle to a shrine on her daughter's birthday, placing it before a small wooden statue and whispering a prayer. And in death too, candles played their part. Laid beside the dying, burned through the night, they were believed to ease the soul's passing. Not to illuminate the way for the living, but for the journey of the one leaving this world. The cost of candles varied wildly. A pound of beeswax candles might cost several days' wages for a laborer. Even tallow was a burden for the poorest. And so candles were sometimes bought individually, by the inch, or made only in winter when days shortened and firelight became necessary. Some homes rationed candle use strictly, lighting them only after a certain hour, or never more than one at a time. A single candle might serve for both supper and sewing. Children might be asked to sit together to share its light when reading or playing. Yet, despite their cost and their fragility, candles were loved. Their glow was intimate. Their presence comforting. To sit beside a candle after a long day was to feel a kind of peace. The flame moved gently like breath. It made shadows dance, softened corners, quieted the mind. Letters written by candlelight were slower, more careful. Thoughts unfolded in rhythm with the flicker. Secrets were shared in candlelit corners. Proposals whispered. Prayers lifted. Tears wiped away by their glow. And the candle itself, humble though it was, marked time, not by ticks but by melting. A slow, visible measure of life passing. Some chandlers marked their tapers with faint scratches to show the hours, a kind of primitive clock. Others added herbs to the wax, not for light but for scent. Lavender for calm, rosemary for memory, time to keep away illness. Over time the candle became not just a tool but a symbol. Of home. Of warmth. Of care. And when its time came to be extinguished, it wasn't snuffed in haste. There was often a moment, a breath, a hesitation, before fingers pinched the wick or a candle snuffer was placed over the flame. As if to thank it. As if to acknowledge its quiet labor. Then darkness returned. But not fearsome darkness. Not hostile. Just the natural end of light. And in the silence that followed, there was rest. After the candle flickers low, after the fire is banked and the chores are tucked away like folded linen, a home leans quietly toward its final task of the day, preparing for sleep. But sleep in the 18th century did not arrive in haste. It was not snatched between late screens and alarms. It was approached gently, invited in with quiet rituals, dimmed light and slow breath. The hour of rest was not a single act but a process. In a simple timber-framed cottage, the preparations begin just after the last embers in the hearth glow orange. The family does not look at clocks. They read the darkening corners, the heavy air, the rising yawn of a child. These are the only cues they need. The father lifts the iron kettle from its hook over the fire, setting it near the wall to cool. He wipes his hands on his apron, then removes it for the evening. His shirt is loose now. His back aches slightly. He pauses before the hearth, watching the coals shift beneath a whisper of ash, and then without a word turns toward the bedroom. The mother, still at the table, folds the day's sewing into a basket, carefully, neatly, though no one will see it until morning. She picks up the stub of a candle, melting into its holder, and carries it carefully into the next room. Its light sways softly on the beams above, catching the edges of pewter plates and wooden cups, glinting once before the door closes behind her. The children are slower. A boy, barefoot, reluctant, scrapes his chair across the floor and begins to gather his little carved animals. They are simple things, smoothed by time, missing ears or legs but beloved. He places them into a linen pouch, tugs the drawstring closed, and yawns so wide it nearly silences the room. The youngest child leans against her sister, heavy-limbed and dozing. Her breath is warm, her hair smells faintly of soap and hay. She is lifted gently, not woken, and carried to bed. There is a basin on a wooden stand in the corner. Cool water, fetched at dusk, now sits still and dark in its bowl. The boy dips a cloth in it, wipes his face, his neck, his feet. It is not indulgent, just habit. He winces a little at the chill but feels cleaner afterward. Beside him, his sister unties the ribbon at the end of her braid, letting her hair fall down her back. Sleep begins here, not in the bed but in these small movements. In townhouses and wealthier homes the rituals are more elaborate, but the essence is the same. A slowing down, a gentle removal from the world. In a quiet London bedroom, a maid enters with a small ceramic ewer and bowl. She pours warm water carefully, steam rising into the candlelight. Her mistress sits at the dressing table, hairpins scattered like tiny fish bones across the wood. One by one they are removed. A silver-handled brush draws long, slow strokes through her hair, each motion more languid than the last. She dabs rose water to her wrists, not for scent but for comfort. A worn nightgown waits folded on the bed. Beside it her slippers. She will kneel briefly at her bedside, whisper a prayer that's more memory than meaning, then climb beneath the sheets. Back in the countryside, a grandfather strikes a match to light a second candle, the one he uses to make his way to the outhouse at the far edge of the yard. The door creaks, the grass is damp with dew, and the sky above is thick with stars. There is no fear in this darkness. Just distance and quiet. Inside the house dims. A mother rubs salve onto her daughter's hands, chapped from laundry, rough from nettles. She hums a slow tune, not sung but breathed, like a thread pulling through cloth. A boy climbs into bed beside his younger brother. There is little space but warmth is shared. They whisper softly for a few minutes, half-remembered stories, thoughts from the day, jokes they do not finish. Soon their voices fade. The mattress is stuffed with straw or feathers, the sheets coarse but clean. A wool blanket, woven by someone long ago, is drawn up to their chins. The room is cool now and getting colder. But the children are warm. In many homes, people did not sleep all through the night. Instead, there was a first sleep and a second sleep. After a few hours, some would stir, naturally, around midnight. This was a time for reflection, sometimes for prayer, or even a small task like stoking the fire, checking on animals, or tending a baby. And then they would return to sleep for a second stretch, deeper and more dream-filled. This segmented sleep was not seen as strange. It was part of the rhythm of life, aligned with the rise and fall of natural light, the body's own clock untouched by artificial glow. Dreams in this world were different too. They arrived slowly, through layers of silence and breath. There were no flashing screens, no buzzes in the dark. The mind descended gently, uncoiled gradually. Sometimes an owl outside the window would call. Or the wind would lift the edge of the thatched roof, rustling the eaves. These were not interruptions, they were part of the tapestry. In wealthier homes, curtains might be drawn tightly, bed warmers tucked between sheets, even a small fire lit in a bedroom hearth. But in most homes the dark was accepted. Not battled, not feared. It was simply the next room the family entered together. There were no alarms to dread. No morning rush to invade the quiet of night. There was only the slow drift downward, the comfort of nearby breath, and the soft, occasional crackle from the embers in the next room. For some, sleep came quickly. For others, it was slower. A mother might lie awake for a time, listening to the breath of her children, the creak of the beams, the occasional footstep of a neighbor walking past in the lane. She thought of the day not with worry but with a kind of folded acceptance. What was done was done. Tomorrow would come. But not yet. A father might shift slightly on the straw mattress, one arm beneath his head, eyes open to the wooden ceiling above. He was not anxious, just still. And finally, one by one, the thoughts quieted. Breath deepened. The candle burned low in its dish, then extinguished itself in a pool of wax. And the hour of rest became the night itself. The world at midnight was not the world of evening, nor was it the world of early dawn. It was something separate, quieter, older, untouched by the rhythms of the day. It was a time not everyone saw, but one that, for many centuries, was deeply familiar. In the 18th century, before the invention of electric light or the rigid march of factory time, the night had its own breathing pace. And midnight, true midnight, was its stillest hour. The hearth has long since gone cold. The coals, once glowing like tiny suns, are now gray beneath a blanket of ash. The rooms, warmed only by the body heat of those sleeping within them, are silent. The candle in the corner burned out hours ago. Even the creaking beams of the cottage seem to pause. Yet not everyone is asleep. This is the hour between the first and second sleep, a liminal space that was once expected, not feared. In many households, some would stir gently at this time. Not all. Perhaps only one or two. But across the countryside, across the winding alleys of town, some eyes flutter open not in panic but in calm. A woman rises slowly, not hurried. She wraps a shawl around her shoulders and steps lightly over the wooden floor. She knows where the cold spots are. She moves through the dark not by sight but memory. She doesn't light a candle. There's no need. The full moon spills its pale light through the small window, casting silver across the room. It's enough. She pours a little water from the earthen jug into a tin cup and drinks. Then she sits. Not to work. Not to think. Simply to sit. There's something holy in this hour. Something ancient. She hears the faint bleat of a lamb outside. The far-off hoot of an owl. The gentle breathing of her children behind her. She isn't tired nor wide awake. She is somewhere in between. And this, for her, is peace. Others, too, awaken in this time, not because they are restless but because the body, long attuned to darkness, opens its eyes for a while. In old texts, this waking hour was called the watch. Monks, in their cloisters, built entire prayers around it. The nocturnes, whispered in stone chapels, candlelit and echoing, were said not just for the living, but for the souls in between. In some households this was the time to pray. A short, quiet litany. Not aloud, never aloud, but in the hush of the mind. In others it was the hour to tend to infants or to sit beside the ill. A father might check the cow due to calve, slipping outside in his boots, lantern in hand, breath rising in puffs before him. The air at this hour is different. There is no wind, only stillness. No calls, only echoes. No movement, except the slow drift of clouds across the stars. And beneath that sky the world sleeps on. In the cities midnight is softer too. The rattle of wheels has faded. The taverns are closed. The streets, earlier filled with voices and footsteps, are now deserted. A lamplighter leans back in his chair, hat tipped over his eyes, snoring gently by the last of the flame. In an upper room, a scholar blinks at a page, half asleep. He's not reading anymore. He's watching the shadow of the candle sway on the wall, a halo of yellow in a sea of black. He lets the book fall gently shut, extinguishes the flame and leans into the night. There is something about darkness this deep that invites reflection. The kind that doesn't require words. In country homes a person might rise to use the privy, pausing at the door to listen. The animals stir softly in the barn, dreaming their own wordless dreams. A dog turns in its sleep, sighs and is still again. And then comes that briefest window of wakefulness where nothing is expected. There is no work to be done. No voices to answer. No lamps to light. No thoughts to chase. One simply exists, floating inside the pause. Some called it the watching hour. Others called it God's quiet. Old wives said it was the best time to conceive a child. Some said it was when the veil was thinnest between worlds, when the dead could whisper and dreams might root more deeply in the mind. But for most it was just a part of life. A soft waking. A bit of bread. A glass of water. A moment by the window to look at the moon. And then slowly back to bed. The blankets are cold again at first. The mattress creaks under shifting weight. But sleep, gentle and unhurried, returns without struggle. There is no pressure to catch it. It simply comes like mist settling over a field. And then true silence. A silence deeper than silence. Not the absence of sound but the fullness of night. The kind that covers everything. That soothes even the restless floorboards. That presses softly against every shutter and whispers, "Not yet, morning has not yet come." This is the heart of the night. Not lonely but whole. It has no color, only shadow. No direction, only stillness. And in that stillness the world resets itself, not with force but with quiet acceptance. In bed, a hand twitches in sleep. A baby shifts in size. A man murmurs something he won't remember. The stars begin to fade. Just a little. Because even this stillness has its end. Even the deepest hour yields in time to the first breath of dawn. But for now the world holds its breath. And everything, is still. Before the rooster, before the stir of cartwheels in the lane, before even the chimney smoke begins to rise, something changes in the air. It is subtle, barely there at first. A shifting of tone. A quiet loosening of the darkness. A cool breath through a cracked shutter. The night is not gone. But it is fading. And across the land, slowly and softly, people begin to wake. They do not wake all at once. Not with jarring alarms or blinking devices. There is no siren song of machines. Waking is gradual, gentle, like the slow rise of mist over a pond. In a cottage near the hedgerow, a child turns in her sleep, blinking slowly, pulling the rough wool blanket higher beneath her chin. The warmth is still too sweet to leave behind. She rolls toward her sister, breath soft, eyes closed again. Not yet. But in the next room her mother stirs. She has been half awake for a while, listening without listening. To the wind in the trees. To the creaking beam. To the breath of the house itself. A house like a person has its own rhythm. Its own sighs and murmurs. After years beneath its roof, one comes to know its moods. She opens her eyes. There is no candle burning, no hearth yet lit. But there is light. Just a trace, like milk poured into ink. The first blue-gray of dawn, low and diffused, creeping through the window pane. She rises without sound. Her feet touch the cold floorboards and she does not flinch. Her hands reach for her apron, then her shawl, folded at the edge of the bed. She dresses in layers, wool worn smooth by use, cotton faded by countless washings. The clothes are neither stiff nor soft. They simply are. In the main room the hearth sits dormant. A fine layer of ash from the night before blankets the coals, but she knows how to coax life from them. She kneels, shifts the ash with the poker, finds the hidden glow. A small breath. Another. And then, a flicker. The flame returns. The kettle is filled. Bread is sliced. Not yet toasted, not yet buttered, but ready. In other homes the pattern is the same. Some wake early. Some do not. A man in the next house overstretches beneath a patchwork quilt. He runs a hand across his face, yawns without opening his eyes, and then, slowly, he sits. His feet search for his shoes beneath the bed. One sock has slipped off in the night. He lights a candle, not because it's still dark but because it comforts him. The act of lighting it is a kind of prayer. Down the road, a farmer unlatches his door and steps outside. The grass is damp with dew. The sky is a watercolor wash of pale pink and bruised blue. He doesn't speak. He simply watches the line of hills on the horizon, waiting for the edge of sun to lift above them. There are no sounds yet, not the full chorus of day. Only the first, the chirp of a blackbird. The soft cluck of a hen. The moan of wood expanding as it warms. In town, a baker is already at work. He's been up an hour or more. His oven is hot, his sleeves are rolled. The smell of yeast and flour fills his little shop. He works silently. The bread will speak for him. Elsewhere, in a larger home, a servant lifts a curtain slightly and peers out. No one else is awake yet. She pads down the hall, her steps quiet, practiced. She fills the water jug for her mistress, slices an apple, stirs the coals in the drawing-room hearth. There is a quiet pride in being first, in having the house still to herself. Not all mornings are pleasant. Some are bitterly cold. Some are gray with drizzle or the sharp threat of storm. But even these are approached with the same slow steadiness. There is no rushing. No frenzied search for keys or slammed doors. People rise when the light tells them to. Children wake more slowly. A boy pulls the blanket over his head. A girl groans softly, then laughs when her mother tickles her foot. In one bed, siblings have rolled together in sleep, warmth shared through the night. They separate reluctantly, stretching, squinting against the growing light. Breakfast is not a feast. A heel of bread, a slice of cheese, a bowl of porridge stirred with a wooden spoon. Sometimes milk. Sometimes only water. But it is eaten together, in silence or soft conversation. The rhythm of eating prepares the mind for the rhythm of work. Before eating, many pray. Not loudly but as a murmur. Thanking God for rest, for another day, for the sun and the bread and the unburnt roof above. And outside, the world has awakened too. Smoke begins to rise from chimneys. The road, empty at first, now echoes with the sound of boots, of hooves, of cartwheels over stone. Chickens strut into the yard. A dog barks once, then lies back down. The sky has brightened to full blue. In the fields, workers gather. In the shops, doors are unlatched. The day begins. But it does not crash into motion. It arrives with breath, with intention, with light. And for a few moments, just before the clamor returns, there is stillness. A shared pause across homes, towns, villages, farms. The knowing that night has passed, that morning has come, and that the day, whatever it holds, can now begin. And all of it began with light. Not from a switch or a screen. But from a flame. From the lifting of a shutter. From a sun rising beyond the edge of the earth. The world once again turns toward day. And the candle, now unlit, rests on its shelf. Until the evening calls for it again.